What happens when a woman seeking revenge against the man who destroyed her father's life discovers the truth is more complicated than she ever imagined? Chen breaks into a corporate tower to expose billionaire CEO Damien Cross, but their chance encounter in an elevator leads to shocking revelations, forbidden attraction, and impossible choices that will test everything they believe about love, justice, and redemption. Asterisk story time. Fam, today we witness how two paths crossing can spark a love that defies every expectation. Asterisk, the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower felt like a glass cage suspended above the churning Seattle streets. Chen pressed her palm against the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching raindrops race down the exterior while her reflection stared back, ghostly and fragmented. The city below pulsed with evening traffic, red taillights bleeding through the storm like arterial flow. She shouldn't be here, not at 9 p.m. on a Friday, not in a building that housed the very people who had destroyed her father's company 3 years ago. But the security badge cloned from a careless executive's jacket pocket had gotten her this far. And the financial records she needed were somewhere in the corporate archives 20 floors above. The elevator chimed behind her, and Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. She spun around, expecting security, but found herself face to face with a man who looked as out of place as she felt. His expensive suit was rumpled, his dark hair disheveled, and there was something hollow in his green eyes that made her forget to breathe. "You're not supposed to be here either," he said. Not a question, but a statement delivered with the weariness of someone who recognized a fellow trespasser. Maya's hand moved instinctively toward the pepper spray in her purse. "I could say the same about you." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of whiskey on his breath, mixed with something darker. Desperation, maybe? "Own this building," he said quietly. "So technically I'm always supposed to be here. The question is, what brings a corporate spy to my tower on the anniversary of the worst day of my life?" The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She knew that voice from the depositions, from the court recordings she'd played obsessively for months.
Ow.
This was Damien Cross, the man whose signature had appeared on every document that had bankrupted her father's engineering firm. The man whose empire had risen from the ashes of companies like theirs. "You're him," she whispered, backing toward the windows. "You're the bastard who killed my father." Damien's expression shifted, the hollow look replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. "Your father? What was his name? David Chen?" "Chen. Engineering Solutions." Maya's voice cracked on the words. "He put a gun to his head rather than lose everything to vultures like you." Act. The silence stretched between them, electric, with recognition and rage. Outside, thunder rolled across the sound, and the lights of the city blurred through the rain-soaked glass. Maya realized she was trapped between a predator and a 42-story drop. "I remember David," Damien said finally, his voice barely audible above the storm. "He was a good man who got caught in a war he didn't understand. Don't you dare pretend to. I didn't want it to happen." The words exploded from him with such raw anguish that Maya stepped back in shock. "I tried to stop it, but I was outvoted. By the board. Your father's company was collateral damage in a hostile takeover I opposed from the beginning." Maya stared at him, searching his face for lies, for the cold calculation she'd expected to find. Instead, she saw something that looked like genuine torment, and it made her want to scream. "So what are you doing here?" she demanded, celebrating. "Your victory?" Damien laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "I come here every year on this date to remember what I've become, to punish myself for the things I've done and the things I've failed to stop." He pulled a small silver key from his pocket. "The archives are on the 62nd floor. If you're looking for evidence of my crimes, I can save you the trouble of breaking in." Maya's world tilted. This wasn't how revenge was supposed to feel. The man standing before her was supposed to be a monster, not a broken soul carrying his own ghosts. "Why would you help me destroy you?" she whispered. Damien moved to the elevator and pressed the call button. When the doors slid open, he stepped inside and held them with one hand, because maybe it's time someone finally did. The 62nd floor archives smelled of leather and old paper. A tomb of corporate secrets housed behind mahogany panels and climate-controlled glass cases. Maya followed Damien through rows of filing cabinets, her footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that probably cost more than her father had made in his final year. "The Meridian acquisition files are in Section M," Damien said, his voice echoing in the cathedral-like space. "Everything you need to hang me should be there. Bank records, board meeting transcripts, communication logs." Maya watched him unlock a massive cabinet with the silver key, his movements mechanical, practiced. "You've done this before," she realized, "every year. I come here and read through the evidence of my own damnation." He pulled out a thick manila folder and held it toward her. "Your father wasn't the only casualty. There were 17 companies, hundreds of families destroyed. I have all their names memorized." Maya's hands trembled as she took the folder. Inside were documents that could expose decades of corporate malfeasance, enough to bring down not just Damien but half the tech industry in Seattle. Bank transfers, falsified reports, communication threads that revealed a pattern of calculated destruction. "Why show me this?" she asked, spreading the papers across a reading table. "You could go to prison. I should go to prison." Damien poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter on the far wall. "The question is, whether you have the stomach to put me there?" Maya looked up from the documents, studying his profile in the dim light. "You think I won't do it? You think I'm weak?" "I think you're nothing like me," he said, turning to face her. "Which is why you might actually succeed where I've failed." "What do you mean?" Damien moved closer and Maya caught that scent again. Whiskey and desperation, but underneath it something else. Something that made her pulse quicken despite everything she knew about him. "I've been trying to destroy myself for 3 years," he said, "drinking too much, taking risks, pushing everyone away. But I'm too much of a coward to do it properly. I need someone with nothing left to lose." Maya's breath caught. "You want me to be your executioner? I want you to be my salvation." The words hung between them, loaded with implications that made Maya's skin burn. She looked back down at the papers, at her father's name typed in cold corporate font, at the signatures that had sealed his fate. "There's something else," Damien said quietly. "Something I never told the lawyers or the investigators." Maya's head snapped up. "What?" "Your father called me the night before he died. He wanted to meet to discuss alternatives. I was in Tokyo on business, couldn't get back in time." Damien's voice cracked. "If I had taken that call seriously, if I had moved mountains to get home, maybe he would still be alive." The confession hit Maya like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the dark wood. "You're lying." "I wish I were." Damien pulled out his phone, scrolled through old voicemails, kept the message. "Listen to it sometimes when I want to remember what it feels like to fail someone completely." Maya's world spun. The narrative she'd built, the simple story of good versus evil, crumbled around her. If Damien was telling the truth, then her father's death wasn't just corporate murder. It was a tragedy born of misconnections and impossible timing. "Play it," she whispered. Damien's hand hovered over the phone. "Are you sure? Once you hear his voice again, you can't unhear it." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The recording began, and suddenly her father's voice filled the archives. Tired but hopeful, asking for a chance to save his company and his employees. Asking for mercy from a man he still believed might show him some. When the message ended, Maya was crying. Hot, silent tears that she tried to hide behind her hair, but Damien saw them anyway. "I failed him," he said softly. "I failed you. I failed everyone who trusted me to be better than the men who came before me." Maya looked up at him through her tears. And for a moment she saw not the corporate predator of her nightmares, but a man drowning in his own guilt. It would be easy to hate him, easy to use the evidence in her hands to destroy him completely. But looking at him now, broken and raw in the dim light of the archives, realized that destroying Damien Cross wouldn't bring her father back. It wouldn't heal the wounds that had driven her to break into this tower in the first place. "Do you want from me?" she asked. Damien moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I want you to save us both," he said. "Help me make this right. Help me become the man your father thought I could be." Maya's breath caught as his hand reached toward her face, hovering just inches from her cheek. The space between them crackled with electricity, with possibility, with the terrible weight of shared grief. "And if I can't," she whispered. "Then burn it all down," Damien said. "Use those documents. Destroy me. But either way, don't let me keep existing in this purgatory." Thunder crashed outside the windows, and the lights flickered. Dun 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 da. In that moment of darkness, Maya felt something shift between them, something that went deeper than revenge or redemption, something that might destroy them both. 3 weeks later, Maya sat across from Damien in a downtown cafe, watching him sketch architectural plans on napkins while rain hammered the windows. They'd been meeting like this almost daily, ostensibly to plan how to expose the corruption that had destroyed her father's company. In reality, they were dancing around something far more dangerous than corporate fraud. The foundation could be operational within 6 months, Damien said, pushing the improvised blueprints toward her. "The Chen Center for Ethical Business Practices. We use my resources to create something your father would have been proud of." Maya studied the sketches, her heart clenching at the sight of her father's name, rendered in Damien's precise handwriting. "You think charity work will wash the blood off your hands?" "No," Damien said quietly, "but it might stop the bleeding." Maya looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. To read the subtle shifts in his expression, the way his jaw tightened when he was fighting ghosts, the way his eyes darkened when he looked at her like she was his only anchor in a storm. "There's a board meeting tomorrow," she said. "The quarterly review where they'll discuss new acquisitions. You could stop it. Use your position to prevent other companies from suffering like my father's did." "I could," Damien agreed. "But the board won't like it. I'll be making enemies of some very powerful people." "Are you afraid of them?" Damien's laugh was bitter. "I'm afraid of what they'll do to you when they realize you're the one behind my sudden attack of conscience." The words sent a chill down Maya's spine. She'd been so focused on their personal connection that she'd forgotten the larger forces at play. Damien wasn't just any CEO. He was part of a network of men who treated human lives like chess pieces, and they wouldn't tolerate disruption quietly. "Maybe I should disappear," she said. "Take the evidence I have and go to the authorities. Let them handle it." "It's too late for that." Damien's hand moved across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "They already know about you. About us." Maya's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" Damien pulled out his phone, showed her a series of photographs. Images of them in the cafe and the park where they had walked last weekend outside her apartment. Building someone had been watching, documenting every moment of their unlikely alliance. "Marcus Vance, the board chairman," Damien explained. "He's had me followed since the day you first appeared in my building. He thinks you're either a corporate spy or a blackmail artist." Maya stared at the photos, her mind racing. "Which means he knows I broke into the tower. Worse, he knows I let you." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. The board believed Damien was compromised. They wouldn't just remove him from power. They'd destroy him completely, and she'd be collateral damage in the process. "We have to stop," she said, pulling her hand away from his. "This was insane from the beginning. I should never have don't." Damien's voice was sharp, desperate. "Don't run from this, from us." "There is no us," Maya shot back. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Over the past 3 weeks, something had grown between them that went beyond their shared guilt and trauma. Late-night phone calls that lasted until dawn, conversations that revealed the wounded children hiding inside their adult facades. Moments of connection so intense they left Maya breathless and terrified. "You're scared," Damien said. "Aye, but running won't change what's happening between us." "What's happening between us is toxic," Maya whispered. "I'm falling for the man who killed my father. Do you know how sick that makes me?" "Your father didn't die because of me," Damien said firmly. "He died because of a system that treats human beings as expendable resources. A system I've been part of, yes, but not one I created alone." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to cling to the simple narrative that had sustained her for 3 years, but she'd seen too much now, learned too much about the complex web of corruption and coercion that had trapped them both. "The board meeting tomorrow," she said finally. "What will you do what you want me to do?" "What your father would want me to do?" Damien's eyes burned with determination. "I'll stop them, even if it costs me everything." Maya studied his face, searching for deception, for the calculating coldness she'd expected to find when she first broke into his tower. Instead, she saw a man willing to sacrifice his empire for the chance at redemption. And after that, she asked, "When they come for you, when they come for me?" Damien reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. "Then we face it together, or we burn together. Either way, we don't run." Maya felt the last of her defenses crumble. Against every instinct, every lesson her father had taught her about trust and betrayal. She was falling for Damien Cross, not despite his darkness, but because of the light she saw him fighting to find within it. "Okay," she whispered. "Together." Damien's smile was radiant, transformative. For a moment, Maya could see the man he might have been in a different world, under different circumstances. The man she might have loved without reservation. Then her phone buzzed with an incoming text, and the moment shattered. "Maya Chen," she read aloud, her voice hollow with shock. "You have 24 hours to convince Damien Cross to vote with the board tomorrow. We release evidence of your father's embezzlement to every major news outlet in the country. Sleep well." The phone clattered to the table as Maya's hands began to shake. She looked up to find Damien staring at her with a mixture of confusion and growing horror. "Your father's embezzlement?" he said slowly. "Maya, what aren't you telling me?" Maya's world collapsed around her as she realized the terrible truth. She'd been so focused on exposing Damien's crimes that she'd never considered her father might have secrets of his own. Secrets that could destroy not just her memory of him, but any chance she and Damien might have had at building something real together. "I don't know," she whispered, but even as she said it, fragments of memory began to surface. Late nights when her father worked alone in his study, expensive gifts that seemed beyond their means, phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room. Damien's expression hardened, the warmth in his eyes replaced by something cold and calculating. For the first time in weeks, Maya saw the corporate predator she'd expected to find 3 weeks ago. "You've been lying to me," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Playing the grieving daughter while your father was just another corrupt businessman who got caught with his hand in the till." "That's not true," Maya protested, but the words sounded hollow even to her. "Isn't it?" Damien stood, his movement sharp and predatory. "Tell me, Maya, what else have you been hiding from me?" Maya opened her mouth to deny it, to defend her. Father's memory, but no words came, because somewhere deep down, in a place she'd refused to examine for 3 years, she'd always known there was more to her father's story than she'd been willing to face. And now that truth was about to destroy everything. Maya stood in her father's old study at 3 a.m., surrounded by boxes she'd never had the courage to open. The room smelled of dust and old leather, of dreams that had died 3 years ago. Her hands trembled as she pulled out financial records, bank statements, correspondence that painted a picture she'd refused to see. David Chen had been stealing from his own company for 2 years before the acquisition. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as desperation set in. Medical bills for her mother's cancer treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. Mortgage payments on a house that was already underwater. The gradual erosion of a good man's principles under the weight of impossible choices. "God, Dad," Maya whispered, sinking into his old desk chair. "What did you do?" Her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Found anything interesting yet?" "The board meeting is in 6 hours. Tick-tock, Maya." Maya stared at the evidence spread before her. Understanding finally dawning. Her father hadn't been a victim of corporate greed. He'd been a desperate man who'd made terrible choices. And when those choices caught up with him, he'd taken the coward's way out rather than face the consequences. The doorbell rang, sharp and urgent in the pre-dawn silence. Maya found Damien. On her doorstep, his expensive suit replaced by jeans and a sweater, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "I know you don't want to see me," he said before she could speak. "But we need to talk." Maya stepped aside to let him in, too exhausted to fight. "I found the records. You were right. He was stealing. Maya, don't. She led him to the study. Gestured at the papers scattered across the desk. Look for yourself. 2 years of embezzlement. Money taken from employee pension funds, from client accounts. He was robbing people who trusted him. Damien moved to the desk, his expression unreadable as he scanned the documents. This doesn't change anything between us. Maya laughed bitterly. It changes everything. My whole crusade for justice was built on a lie. I broke into your building, manipulated your guilt, fell in love with you under false pretenses. You fell in love with me? The question was quiet, vulnerable. Heart clenched. Don't make me say it again. Not now, when everything is falling apart. Damien moved toward her, his eyes intense with something that looked like hope. Maya, listen to me. Your father made mistakes, but that doesn't invalidate everything he stood for. He was still a good man who got caught in an impossible situation. He stole money from widows and retirees, Maya said, her voice hollow, was going to let his employees take the blame when the acquisition went through. That's not a good man, Damien. That's a coward. He was human, Damien said firmly. Flawed, desperate, but human. Just like me, just like you. Maya stared at him, seeing the parallel he was drawing. This is different. You broke into my building. You lied about your motivations. You've been manipulating me for weeks. Damien's voice was gentle, not accusatory. But I don't love you any less for it. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Don't say that. Don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not making anything harder. Damien reached for her, and this time she didn't pull away. I love you, Maya. Not despite your flaws, but because of them. Because you're real and complicated and beautifully broken, just like me. Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks. The board meeting? Fuck the board meeting. Let them destroy me. I don't care anymore. Damien's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. The only thing I care about is you. But the blackmail, let them release the evidence about your father. Let the whole world know what kind of man David Chen really was. Won't change how I feel about his daughter. Maya searched his eyes, looking for deception, for the coldness that had appeared in the cafe yesterday. Instead, she found only warmth, only acceptance, only love so fierce it took her breath away. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Neither do I, but maybe that's the point. Maybe broken people deserve love too. Maya kissed him then, desperate and hungry and full of 3 years of suppressed grief. Damien responded with equal fervor, his hands tangling in her hair, their bodies pressing together with the urgency of people who'd found salvation in each other's arms. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since her father's death. Hope. What do we do now? She asked. We face it together, Damien said. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Maya nodded, feeling stronger than she had in years. They spent the next hour making plans, preparing for the fallout that would come when Damien defied the board. When the truth about her father's embezzlement became public knowledge, as dawn broke over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold, and Pink Maya felt like they might actually have a chance. Like love might be enough to overcome the forces arrayed against them. She was wrong. The knock on the door came at 7 a.m., sharp and official. Maya opened it to find Marcus Vance flanked by 2 security guards, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile coldly predatory. Miss Chen, he said pleasantly, I hope you slept well. We need to talk. Maya's blood turned to ice. Behind her, she heard Damien's sharp intake of breath. You're not supposed to be here, Damien said, moving to stand beside Maya. Oh, but I am, Vance replied, stepping into the apartment uninvited. See, Miss Chen here's been very busy. Breaking and entering corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud. Quite an impressive resume for such a young woman. Get out, Maya said, finding her voice. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, you have something I need. Vance's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Your cooperation, or should I say your silence? What do you want? Damien demanded. Simple. Miss Chen is going to recant her accusations against Cross Industries. She's going to admit that she fabricated evidence in a misguided attempt to avenge her criminal father. And you, Damien, are going to vote with the board today and forget all about your sudden attack of conscience. Maya felt the walls closing in around her. And if we refuse, Vance's smile widened. Then I'm afraid there will be consequences. Serious consequences for both of you. He nodded to one of the security guards, who handed him a tablet. The screen showed a live video feed of an elderly woman in a hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to various machines. Maya's mother, dying of the cancer that had bankrupted their family, that had driven her father to desperate measures. She looks peaceful, doesn't she? Vance said conversationally. It would be such a shame if something happened to interrupt her treatment. Medical accidents happen so frequently these days. Maya's world went white with rage and terror. You bastard. I'm a businessman, Miss Chen. Nothing more, nothing less. Vance pocketed the tablet. You have 1 hour to decide. Cooperate, and your mother receives the best care money can buy. Refuse, and well. He shrugged elegantly. I think you understand the alternative. As Vance left with his guards, Maya sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the weight of an impossible choice. Damien knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms. But for the first time since they'd found each other, his touch couldn't provide comfort. Because Maya knew what she had to do, and it would destroy them both. The boardroom of Cross Industries occupied the entire 70th floor. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline. Maya stood in the hallway outside, her reflection ghost-like in the polished marble walls, watching. Through the glass doors as Damien took his seat at the massive conference table. She'd made her choice. The hardest choice of her life. 30 minutes earlier, she'd called Marcus Vance and agreed to his terms. She would publicly recant her accusations, would paint herself as an unstable woman driven mad by grief. In exchange, her mother would receive the experimental treatment that might save her life. The cost of that bargain sat like lead in her chest. Maya pressed her palm against the glass, wishing she could touch Damien one last time, could explain why she was about to betray everything. They'd built together, but some sacrifices were too large for explanations. It's too necessary for forgiveness. Inside the boardroom, Vance called the meeting to order. Maya activated the recording app on her phone, knowing she'd need evidence of what happened next, even if she could never use it. Before we begin with today's acquisitions, Vance announced, his voice carrying through the speaker system, I'm afraid we have some unpleasant business to address. It has come to our attention that our CEO has been compromised by a corporate spy. Damien's head snapped toward the glass doors, his eyes finding Maya's through the transparent barrier. The look of betrayal on his face nearly brought her to her knees. That's not true, Damien said, his voice steady, despite the accusation. Isn't it? Vance gestured toward the doors. Miss Chen, please join us. Maya entered the boardroom on unsteady, legs avoiding Damien's gaze as she took the seat Vance indicated. The faces around the table regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Powerful men who viewed her as nothing more than a pawn in their larger game. Miss Chen, Vance said pleasantly, please tell the board about your relationship. With our CEO, Maya's throat felt like sandpaper. She could feel Damien's eyes on her, burning with confusion and growing hurt. I targeted Mr. Cross as part of a personal vendetta against this company. And why did you have this vendetta? Because I blamed Cross Industries for my father's death. I was wrong. The words tasted like poison. My father was embezzling money. From his own company? When he was caught, he chose suicide rather than face the consequences. Cross Industries had nothing to do with his decision. The silence in the room was deafening. Maya risked a glance at Damien and immediately wished she hadn't. The man who'd held her in his arms just hours ago now looked at her like she was a stranger. Like everything between them had been a lie. And your break into our building? Vance prompted. I was looking for evidence to use against Mr. Cross. When I couldn't find any, I decided to manipulate him personally. I pretended to be attracted to him, made him believe we had some kind of connection. Maya's voice cracked on the words. I used his guilt to make him believe he could redeem himself by helping me. That's enough, Damien said quietly. He stood, his movement sharp and controlled. I've heard enough. But we haven't finished, Vance began. We're finished. Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. Miss Chen, congratulations. You've succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. You wanted to destroy me, and you have. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to throw herself at his feet and beg for forgiveness she didn't deserve. Instead, she sat frozen as the man she loved walked out of the boardroom and out of her life. The next hour passed in a blur of legal documents and non-disclosure agreements. Maya signed everything Vance put in front of her, sealing her silence, in exchange for her mother's life. When it was over, she found herself alone in the hallway, staring at her reflection in the marble walls. She'd won. Her mother would live. Corrupt board would continue their predatory practices, but that was a price Maya had to pay. Some battles couldn't be won without sacrificing everything that mattered. Maya made her way to the elevator, her legs unsteady. Beneath her, as the doors slid open, she found herself face to face with Damien. He was carrying a box of personal items, his expression carved from stone. Going down, he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They rode in silence, the elevator that had first brought them together, now carrying them toward their final goodbye. When they reached the ground floor, Damien turned to her one last time. I hope it was worth it, he said. Whatever they promised. I hope it was worth destroying us both. Maya watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the Seattle crowd. Only then did she allow herself to break, to collapse against the elevator wall and sob for everything she'd lost and everything she'd never had the chance to keep. 6 months later, Maya stood in the garden of the hospice where her mother had spent her final weeks. The experimental treatment had bought them precious time, enough for goodbyes and forgiveness, enough for her mother to tell her stories about her father that painted him not as a saint or a sinner, but as a complicated man who'd made impossible choices in an imperfect world. The cherry trees were blooming, their pale pink petals drifting on the spring breeze like snow. Maya had learned that morning that Cross Industries had been investigated by federal regulators, that several board members, including Marcus Vance, were facing charges for securities fraud and racketeering. The investigation had been triggered by an anonymous tip that included detailed financial records and recorded conversations. Someone had been recording everything. Someone had been planning for justice. All along, Maya pulled out her phone and dialed the number she'd memorized, but never had the courage to call. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hello, Maya. The recordings, she whispered. You knew I was wearing a wire. I hoped you were smart enough to protect yourself. Damien's voice was tired, but not unkind. I'm glad you were. I'm sorry, Maya said, the words inadequate for the weight of her betrayal. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. You saved your mother's life. You don't need to apologize for that. Maya closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. I destroyed us. No, Damien said quietly. The system destroyed us. You just made sure it couldn't destroy anyone else. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they'd lost, and everything they could never reclaim. I loved you, Maya whispered. That part was real. All of it was real. I know, Damien replied. I loved you too. The line went quiet, and Maya realized he'd hung up. She stood alone in the garden, surrounded by falling petals and the ghosts of what might have been in the distance. The Seattle skyline rose against the afternoon sky, glass towers catching the light like prisms. Maya thought about the Meridian Tower, about the night she'd first met Damien in that glass cage suspended above the world. She wondered if he ever returned to the archives, if he still punished himself for crimes that belonged to all of them. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Maya's heart stopped as she read the message. There's a package waiting for you at the front desk of Seattle General. Room 4A has a view of the Sound. The cherry trees there bloom later than most. Maya's hands trembled as she recognized the subtle reference to their conversation about timing, about second chances that came too late. She drove across the city in a daze, her mind racing with possibilities she didn't dare name. The package contained a key and a single sheet of paper, an address in the International District, and below it, a note in Damien's precise handwriting. The Chen Center for Ethical Business Practices opened yesterday. Your father would be proud. So would you, if you could forgive yourself long enough to see what we built together. Maya drove through the narrow streets of the International District as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She found the address easily enough, a restored brick building that had once housed a textile factory. A brass plaque by the entrance bore her father's name and a quote he'd often repeated: "Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching." Inside, the space had been transformed into something beautiful and purposeful. Clean lines and natural light, workspaces designed for collaboration, a library filled with resources on ethical business practices. Young entrepreneurs worked at standing desks, their faces bright with the kind of hope Maya remembered from her father's early days. She found Damien on the top floor, standing at a window that overlooked Elliott Bay. He'd lost weight, she noticed, and there were new lines around his eyes. But when he turned to face her, his smile was the same one that had first stolen her breath in an elevator months ago. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't." Maya moved to stand beside him at the window. "I wasn't sure I had the right." "You have every right. This exists because of you, because of your father, because of what we learned about the price of silence." Maya studied his profile, searching for anger, for resentment, for any trace of the betrayal she'd seen in his eyes that day in the boardroom. Instead, she found only the quiet strength that had first drawn her to him. "The federal investigation," she said. "You orchestrated it. We orchestrated it. Your recording from the boardroom was the final piece of evidence they needed." Damien turned to face her fully. "Vance and 3 other board members were arrested last week. Companies they destroyed are being compensated from seized assets. And I'm exactly where I belong, building something better from the ashes of something that needed to burn." He gestured toward the activity below them. 12 startups so far, all committed to transparent business practices. It's not absolution, but it's a start. Maya felt tears threatening again. But this time they weren't born of grief. "My mother died 3 weeks ago. I know, I'm sorry. She forgave me. At the end, she told me that love sometimes requires terrible choices, and that the courage to make them is what separates the living from the merely existing." Damien nodded, understanding passing between them without words. "I've been existing," Maya continued. "Just going through the motions, punishing myself for surviving when she didn't, for choosing her life over our love. And now." Maya looked down at the entrepreneurs below, at the dream they were building together, at the legacy her father had never lived to see. "Now I want to live, if you'll have me, if you can forgive me for being human." Damien's smile was radiant, transformative. "Only if you can forgive me for the same crime." He reached for her then, and Maya didn't hesitate. She stepped into his arms, into the warmth and acceptance she'd thought she'd lost forever. When he kissed her, it tasted like forgiveness, like second chances, like the promise of something new growing from the ruins of what came before. Outside, the lights of Seattle began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. A city of dreamers and schemers, of broken people, finding ways to heal each other. Maya and Damien stood together at the window. It's no longer the damaged souls who'd first collided in an elevator, but something new, something stronger, something that might just change the world. Asterix, let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Maya's situation? Did you see the plot twist coming? Who was your favorite character? What part made you cry? If you enjoyed this story, like this video, subscribe for more emotional stories, hit the bell for notifications, share with friends who love romance. Dram tuck end.